Welcome to the Magma Classroom. This particular classroom series focuses on the basics of digital painting, starting with the fundamentals of value, shapes, light, and color. We've done a good few apples and spheres already in previous lessons, tried our hands at some more interesting still life studies, broken down simple landscapes, and even run a gauntlet of timed exercises to speed up the learning process. This weekly hangout is intended for the determined beginner, and we'll take our time to explore each subject and learn together. I'm your host Ryan, the resident painter and caffeinated Wookiee at Magma, and while I grab a tea refill here, you can find all the instructions for joining me on the canvas in the description below. Ready your drawing tablet? We'll be getting started shortly. All right, hey everybody, welcome to the classroom. We are going to be carrying on today, building on what we did last week, which was breaking down simple landscapes. I thought that this time around we would zero in on a particular part of the landscape, rocks, because once you know how to draw rocks, you can pretty much start to construct your own sort of interesting landscapes, interesting mountains, rock portals, waterfalls, whatever the case may be. So we're going to start off with some simple exercises here. You are, of course, welcome to join me on the canvas. I have got a few extra canvases set up here in our sequence panel. You can find all the instructions to join down below in the video description. If you can't see that, I will also invite you to join me at the classroom Artspace, which I'm going to put in the comments now. There we go. And once you've joined the Artspace, you can then join me on the canvas by following the link I'm about to drop. You have to join the Artspace first before hitting this link. There we go. Sorted. So, yeah, as mentioned in the intro there, this is all intended for the beginner, right? We're building on everything that we've learned so far and going slowly through various elements that'll help you tackle your next piece with a bit more confidence. We've looked at shapes, and that's something that we're very much going to be focusing on here as well, of course. And with rocks, what's cool about them is that you can have all these this huge possibility of different shapes. Lighting, of course, is going to be another really important factor. Rocks have all kinds of different plane changes, and it can get really interesting getting those planes, the lighting on those different planes correct, accurate. They'll be getting your key light, your main light, whether it's sunlight or a kind of focus light from a lamp or something like that. But it also gets a lot of bounce light from the environment. So especially if you're drawing rocks outside, there's going to be a lot of bounce light off of other rocks that have their own color characteristics. Sand, there's the sky as well, giving a bit of sort of cool blue light that tends to bounce around on things if it's a clear day. So yeah, all the stuff we've kind of gone through already, it's going to apply here. So let me get some music going first. Let me know if my audio is all right. I had to put a little thing on here just to soften. We've got some construction noise going on in the background, which is a standard issue here in Georgia. People do construction anytime they like. 7 p.m. on a Thursday night, no worries. So let's go. Cool. So rock studies are one of those things. I mean, even on YouTube, you'll find plenty of videos by different concept artists on rock studies, because they are such an interesting and valuable exercise to do, right? For those reasons I mentioned, being able to understand light, play around with different forms, different. Oh, that music's a bit loud. Let's drop that down. Okay. Oops. A little bit more. Relax, music, relax. Cool. And when you search on Pinterest, I get so inspired just by seeing all these different rocks that other concept artists have done. Whether you're doing really stylized landscapes or trying to do something way more realistic, then yeah, it can be really interesting and can be really challenging depending on the tools that you have available to you, which is something we'll notice here. Rocks tend to have a lot of texture on them, right? If we try not to knock down my microphone. Let's make some slight adjustments here. If we zoom all the way in to some of our rock reference that we have here, you'll see there's lots of cool texture on this. And capturing that with a mere round brush or just a simple square brush can be challenging. Texture brushes are ideally what you want in this case, which we don't have yet for our free users, for example. So we're going to see what we can do here with just our most basic brushes. The focus is going to be on shape more than on texture, shape and lighting. And yeah, so let's go. I'll start off here with this top one just to demonstrate how I would approach doing something like this. First, by studying an actual photo of rocks or mountains or whatever the case may be, some sort of rocky formation, and then from there, starting to construct your own imagined formations gets a little easier, and there's fun ways we can approach that. And I'll show you a little warm-up exercise that I like to do a little later. So let's hide this. Make sure my comments are visible here. Cool. You are welcome to ask questions as we go along, either in the chat in Magma itself or over on YouTube or Twitch, Facebook, wherever you're tuning in from. And while you're here, let me know where you're drawing from today. It'd be cool to see where in the world everyone's at. While I get my tools ready here. Let's keep that. Cool. So I'm just going to be using standard round inking brush. I'm going to try and use like a bit of a pencil. So I'm going to have my density pressure setting on, if it stays on. There we go. And I want to keep this layer light, so I'm going to just drop the opacity of it, just so it doesn't become too dark of a thing. And we're going to analyze this rock here first. Now this is quite an easy shape, right? There is a little bit going on here though. Things that you don't, it's a little subtle, a little difficult to notice at first. Obviously we got this cool outline, but there seems to be like a little step up there, but because of the way the light's on it, you don't really notice it. Curves in here, around like that, but this is a plane onto itself before it goes into that one over there. Got some nice things here. A little loading ramp over here. So some nice change in planes and different angles. Not a lot of a cast shadow because of the type of lighting environment that it's in. This looks like quite a diffused light setting where they're trying to get as much of the rock information as they can visible. But there is some bounce light coming in onto this side here, a little bit less on this side, but it's not straight dark. Anyway, let's get to actually drawing this thing. Now there are two ways to to go about this, depending on how confident you are with diving straight into paint, or if you want to figure things out and place everything a bit more correctly off the bat, you might want to do a sketch first. So we'll go about it in that way this time around. Just go with a bit of a sketch, because there are lots of different planes and things going on. It might be easier to figure things out. But I'm not going to try and get the each exact change of things. I want to get just a broad idea of the shape, and then I'll carve away into it later. This actually comes in a bit more. Angles up. Got a bit of a steep one down. Plane there. We've got this change that brings it up here. Okay, now of course we've got from that corner, it does bump out a little bit over here, where it comes in and wraps around. We've got, see, I like to look at all these kinds of lines, like how much of a distance is that versus the rest of that, and try and figure out my perspective that way, seeing the edges of the silhouette, the directions of those lines, the length of them in relation to other lines that exist. Just a normal way to go about measuring, I guess. Nothing too spectacular there. And something that, in art school, we spend a lot of time just measuring, comparing lines, direction of lines. There we go. And this sort of change of plane over here. And up along, probably a little sharper like that. Now this one's a little tricky here. This shape, this little dip in things. But that's fine. I want to focus on these funny details here just yet. Let's get the main stuff down. This is like a top-facing plane over here. Then we've got a vertical one that comes down, sort of like that. But obviously that upward-facing plane starts to angle down to here. So that's the basic shape that we're going to work with. And now I would want to work on a separate layer. I find with exercise like this, I do tend to work with a lot more layers, but I'll show you why. Let's create a new layer. I'm going to bring this underneath my sketch layer and just set that sketch layer to multiply. And for good practice, let me name this layer. And we'll call this one Birds. That. Now a fun tool is our lasso fill. Now you could obviously just go with the brush, fill this in with around that shape, but there is a quick way to do things. How are we going to go about color? Let's keep to grayscale for this one. We'll first make a little value scale here to work with, just so it's easy to color pick from. Well, that's pretty much the background. Okay, and then with the lasso fill, I just want to get this whole shape filled out really quickly so I can get into the different planes and then start playing around with detail. So now with the lasso fill, I can just follow the outline. And it's a little easier to do because I've put the sketch layer above this one and set it to multiply. Okay, cool. Well, that's all filled in. Now we can start looking at where the shadow and where the light is. Our light looks like it's obviously coming from above. This top plane is much lighter. I don't know if there's much point here doing this. Blends in with the background. And this is tricky. It's not so light. But let's get these dark ones in. these are facing away from the light. This one too, but it is lighter because of the bounce light that's hitting it. But we'll play with that later. Remember, with all the past stuff we've done, we're simplifying things first. We get like the broad idea of value and shape, and then we gradually zero in. We'll see that, okay, well, this value is not quite right. This makes me a little lighter in relation to another plane next to it. So we're just getting a rough thing down, establishing some relationships, and then we can adjust based on that. And we've got, oh, I'm on my brush. That's not what I want. Lasso fill. So yeah, the lasso fill, it just lets you do all this stuff so much quicker. You can draw quite elaborately with this if you get quite comfortable with it too. I just use it for the filling in phase. And then once you've got that in, we can get rid of the sketch layer. But we have a basic shape down. Might want to fill in some of that. Let's see. The main thing with this base layer is to make sure that I'm happy with the silhouette, because I'm going to want to lock this layer. Actually, should have done this before adding in the other planes. Let's have a look. Okay. Round. So just the silhouette that I need to be right. To make this easier to see, let's put a darker layer underneath. I'll grab my pencil for this. Again, just to make all that a little easier to see. Okay. That's not something I need to spend time on. So the reason for wanting to get my silhouette right is that when I'm happy with it, and I want to keep those sharp edges, which often, as much as rocks tend to, whoops, that's wrong layer. As much as rocks tend to have quite a rough surface characteristic, they tend to still have quite a rough, quite a hard edge, quite crisp. Whereas something like a bush, for example, when you're looking at it, it can be quite fuzzy. But rocks tend to be quite a bit harder in terms of their edge. Let's just see. Yeah, this could bump out a little bit more, make it a bit more interesting. Angle that down. Okay. No need to spend too much time on that. Now what one can do is lock the opacity of that layer using the setting over here, just next to your opacity slider for your layer. We can lock the opacity, which would mean that now anything I draw won't go outside of that. But that's not exactly the setting I want. I want to keep things on separate layers. So instead, I'm going to create a new layer and then create a clipping group, which is with this button here. Control-Alt-G is the hotkey, and that locks this layer to the one below it, and it does effectively the same thing. I cannot go beyond where I've drawn already, and that shows me that I've done something interesting there. Let's do that again. I need to erase that bit. This is quite handy because you can keep those hard edges even though you're applying more and more paint. Okay. I erased off of the wrong layer. Come on. What are you doing? There we go. Yes. Okay. Now I don't want that color. But now I can go in and start refining things, changing the planes, adding a bit more in. Still on my Let's just say that's detailing. Where is this little piece? Clear layer. Okay, smaller. Yeah, so now it's just a case of going in and finding all the smaller shapes, making things consistent with the light source, get these different planes looking more accurate, coming in with some of the detail. This is probably too light. Darken that up a little bit. But now you can make your brush, particularly when you're working with textured brushes, you can bump up the size of your brush, which exposes a lot more of the texture. I mean, I can show you an example here, but you might not have this available. So let's just make it a little bit blue. Bump up the size. Get a little bit more of the detail that's in there. Let's multiply, whatever. Because if you make the brush, if you work with a brush that's too small, yeah, you kind of lose a bit of that quality. Undo. Ah, there we go. Trying not to go too far back. So let's maybe exaggerate things here. There's also this interesting little gash in it over here, which is not too dark. It's not too dark, but it's darker than that. And even this, if I lean back and I squint, I can see that there is, it's not quite visible. Hello. Oh, because it's bound to this new layer. That it seems like there's this section here which is a bit lighter. Okay, so I'm going to try to capture that. Come in a bit lighter. Brush, yeah. Isn't quite right. Let's just get a rough shape in. Okay, but now I'm doing it on the wrong layer, so I'm going to bring it down. There we go. Just a little bit of that light here. Okay, and then there's all these little bits, and you start looking, as you go from this point, it's looking for the slightly smaller shapes. Little bit by little bit. Okay. But you don't want to go in there now trying to get, let's say, like this bit over here. It's a little too soon for that. You want to get things reading right from a distance. And you could soften this up. Softening the hardness of the brush, maybe turn off the size to pressure, and just soften these edges a little bit. So it could be a bit smaller. It's not quite so clear cut on the top. There we go. And then you just keep sort of going like this. Now we can start digging into a few more details. Let's harden this back up. Here, that's kind of does that. Even here, there's a little bit of darkness where it's facing away from the light. So I'm looking at all these things, trying to see where is it facing in relation to the light. Like I said, it is a little tricky here with figuring out where the light source is exactly. This here is a little bit lighter. Actually, overall, let's see, let's blend it in a little bit more. Just checking. Okay, canvas is still working on the stream side here. We could even go darker. I've been using 3 values here. You can shift down to something a little darker, Start emphasizing some of these shapes. Size to pressure so I can get really small again. Here we have a sort of triangulish shape. Even the way these shadows work, for like what sort of shapes these make around here. This is a weird tuning fork sort of shape here. Here a little bend. Comes in. And back and forth, back and forth. So that's, obviously that's not a perfectly rendered rock, but to start off the process, we could put a little shadow underneath here. Let's do it with a square brush. Because it would be a bit darker here with the shadow. Anyway. But there's a lot of I mean, you could really spend a lot of time just getting into this. It may look like such a simple shape, but there's a lot to play with. There's a lot of texture in here. Which if you want to capture that with just a round brush, it will take some time. It will take some time. That edge should be much harder. And here, probably even. See now, if I've been painting over all these lines and it stays within the base layer, right? So if I go down to the base layer and I erase, let's go with a bit of a small eraser. If I erase that base layer, it's also going to kind of make invisible the same area on the detail layer that's clipped to it. So if you want to correct your silhouette afterwards, you can do that by adding or subtracting paint. Oops, my eyedropper is not behaving. What? Oh, because I'm using the eraser. That would explain it. That would explain it. I don't often use the eraser. I tend to just paint over the areas. So I always think that I'm on the brush. And there's odd times when I do use the eraser. So this is, even this light value here is probably too much for what we're painting here, but just to show some of these planes a little better. There's a little something going on here. I don't want to work too small. It's no good. It's no good. The shadow comes out a little bit. That's too dark. A little bit over here. This whole section could actually be darker. And there's this really nice thing that comes up here. Little dent in the rock. Creating a nice little crevasse. Cool. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. This is just a basic start. Let's move on to something a little more interesting. I just want to check the other canvases here. Okay, we've got some other peeps joining. What's up, everybody? So we had Ruddock here. Just want to do my greetings. And Everest. Nice. Cool. Thanks for joining, guys. Good to have you here. So I'm going to move on to this more triangular shape thing. Again, I'm going to do the same thing with the sketch layer first, just as a good process. I'm gonna name my layers. And then once we've gone through the basics of this, we can spend a little bit more time really trying to render out something. But I'll show a nice little trick for getting some texture in when you have limited resources. We can do that with this last one, I think. So let's first get onto this. Hide the sequence panel. Koshi animations. Do we need an animation update with onion skin? Yay! We got to just make sure that the painting side of things is mint first before we delve into things like animation. Something like that is quite a complex thing to develop. So, and I know our team is quite busy with some interesting developments at the moment. So you may be waiting a while. Okay, so here we've got. We sort of lean back, squint our eyes a little bit, try and get a sense of the silhouette. I'm going to break these up into two separate objects first. And you can either go with the overall. I'm not going to draw the side stuff here. I just want this. You can either do it as I've done here, make it like a straight triangle and then fit the shape into that or break out of that shape, but just have the initial thing down. Or you can, there's a blue here, might be easier to see, kind of figure out the first shape and then add the other one later behind it. Nice, some people here. So the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to tackle the first shape here. I want to set a color palette now. I want to shift out of grayscale. I'm not going to make it exact. I do want to have a bit of a warm reddish local color. Which I want to have on a separate layer. Here, a little bit bigger. So we'll have a warm reddish orange, maybe a little bit more red. And for our shadow, what's it looking like here? Let's see, what does our eyedropper tell us? You can use your eyedropper to just try and get a sense of what happens to the color temperature when you're shifting around. It looks like there's a cooler light that's on it, and when we go into the shadows, let's gain a bit of saturation, although I think it's more just the filtering is here. So I'm going to go with a cooler shadow, and to do that, things tend to get cooler when we shift over to when we desaturate a color a little bit. And let's do rough halfway to black. Maybe shift a little bit into the reds. Gonna have that as our. Even go a bit more extreme than that. And then for our light, it's a bit warmer, brighter. Yeah, that's a fun color scheme. If we want to have some highlights, maybe we go with something a bit more yellow, a bit brighter there, and go deeper into that red for much darker, or maybe even more towards purple for those deep shadows. There's more like cast shadow areas. So let's sketch this out. I'm going to actually just stay with that same red. And okay. So that's a rough sort of triangle. I'm just going to do that. You can always go over your reference just to get a sense of the angle of the line. Go do a few ghost lines before moving in. And this one, it does bend in. Yes. That this actually comes out quite a bit. It's up and then bends to the top. Bit of an exaggeration. I'm not worried about being exactly accurate to the reference. I want to get a sense of shape and planes. Come up a little bit. Okay. really awesome shape just before it turns up there. Car shadow, I'm not going to worry about that. Okay. And then we have our piece in the background. It's a little difficult to see where the end of that is. It seems to just peek out there. So let's do this. You're looking at the direction of our planes here. It does that. Then one that's facing us. And it doesn't come all the way over here, so I'm looking at those little points from where it starts to where it ends. It comes up, up, in, up, and over. Cool. So that's our sketch. Don't need to do anything more than that. Don't want to spend any more time playing with unnecessary things. So what I'm going to do, I can leave it as it is. I'm going to grab, change, thank you. Grab our local mid value here, that sort of orange. I'm going to switch over to the lasso fill and just fill in the entire thing, just so that I have a hard shape silhouette to clip to. Oops, I made a bit of a blunder there. No problem. Okay, now we can start adding in, breaking things down a little bit more to the different planes, facing us, more or less, towards us. Things are in shadow. Now what I'm going to do here, actually, let's add that new layer, clip it down. I'll leave that sketch layer there for now, because even with the lasso full, I can draw outside, but it's not going to go beyond that silhouette. Nice for keeping things neat. Yeah, that top bit's catching a bit of light. Actually, I can worry about that later. Let's just get this in. And even lightly draw this if you want to. And that's this little section here as a detail for later. Now, when it comes to adding light into this, it's a bit interesting because there's not a whole lot. We've got light over here that sort of fades down, but it's not like we have a really hard lit light facing plane. A lot of it tends to be this sort of mid value. So let's see. But it's definitely lighter here, but a bit more desaturated. That I do want to have. And then here, actually that was way too high. Let's neaten that up. Sort of this section here. Okay, now I can get rid of that sketch layer, and we can start getting into the thick of things. Switch to our brush now, and let's start with where it's quite dark. It's very obviously dark. It does grade its way up, where it's not that the whole plane is super dark. Let's turn off the size there. It could be a bit bigger. Don't want to work with too small of a brush. So it sort of fades up. I've gone a little bit over there. I'm going to still try and keep my edges hard here. So let's make it smaller. Could even go a bit darker in these areas if we are following the reference. Something like that. Down at the bottom here, also a little bit darker. Oops, that's a bit excessive. So I don't want to go with a small brush. Okay, it's going to take long to be really neat, especially if I'm trying to fade this thing out. But if I go with too big of a brush, it's easy to go over areas that I don't want to yet. So what do? This is where our selection tools come in. So we can use a lasso selection here, and zoom in a bit so I can try and be a bit more accurate and draw out the area, and then go over to a larger brush. And now it's going to keep that hard edge that's there. Okay. So when I deselect now, I haven't gone over that section unless I went over with the lasso. It's a nice crisp edge. So that's something you're probably going to use a lot when you're working with rocks. Some people do entire elaborate drawings just with lasso and paint bucket, or lasso for combining the two together. It's quite interesting stuff. And so this is the basics, right? You don't have to. This track sounds so like slow-mo at the beginning. It's weird. Anyway, I want to get this fading down as well. I could do the same thing. Grab my lasso. And this will probably change. Go back over. Roughly like that. There we go. And then same thing up here. I can come in again later with that. There was that little nice carve into it. So I'm constantly playing around with my settings here as well, right? I'm switching between high opacity, high density, dropping that a little bit if I want things to gradate a little bit. And here, just to accentuate this corner, I might want to go a bit darker. That's a bit too much. Color pick. Come in here. Here, there's interesting shape change. Well, no, shape change. Well, definitely a shape change, but thinking more plane change. It sort of casts over. Here as well, there's a bit of a sharp piece there. Now we can start playing with these little areas. Now we can get into finer details. A little carve that comes through over here. Okay, that's maybe a bit high, but that's okay. Got this piece here. And then there is a little bit of some flecks of white even. Let's put that in there. A little bit over here. Could probably color dab around a little bit and start just dabbing. Depending on what sort of style you want to go for. If you want to start shifting towards realistic, you're going to find yourself dabbing a lot more. This highlight is too strong. Just to get some unpredictability. And some variation. Obviously rocks, they're not such flat colors. This, right? It's going to be little bits of things going on all the time. So, I saw there was a comment here. Koshi, we're all here to learn, Koshi. Don't you worry. It's no one's better or worse than anyone else here. Okay, so that's another simple rock form. Of course, you can spend quite a lot more time here getting these shapes more accurate, getting a bit of detail in, finding those more subtle changes in plane. But I want to move on before we get really stuck into one piece. Actually, here I can show you what happens with wanting to bring in a bit of texture. Okay, so we don't have texture brushes available to everyone in Magma right now. Coming soon. But what we can do is we can start making use of photo textures. Most of us have got a smartphone on us with a camera. And when you start looking for it, there are just textures everywhere that you can pull from. I was sitting on the bus the other day, looking at, staring at the back sort of headdress of the person in front of me, and it had this weird cracked carpet type of texture, which I'll bring in here quickly. Oh, that's interesting. I could work with this. Okay, so this kind of texture. This was on the back of the seat. So what we can do with this? Firstly, I don't want the color characteristics of this. I just want that texture that's in it. So I'm going to go to my filter, hue, saturation, lightness, reduce the saturation all the way down, and now it still has a lot of contrast in here. Maybe we can go to our brightness contrast, bring the contrast down a little bit, and now, okay, I've just pasted this straight over the top of my thing, of my rock formation. I want it to just appear where I have a rock already. So I'm going to add that to that clipping group over here. And now we have it in just the form of our rock silhouette. Okay. And then we can play with our layer modes. So typically I'll probably go with overlay and check what that does. So now that adds a nice bit of texture that is obviously too strong right now. So let's dial this back. But what's interesting with this is that you can then build on that texture, use the characteristics of that texture to make other changes to your rock formations, as long as it's consistent with the type of rock that you're dealing with. Often rocks can have all kinds of patterns built into them, right, and how they form. So you might want to stick with that. But here we can see all these nice little cracks, for example, that maybe I want to play with. So I'll put another layer on top. Did the first rock. Awesome. I'm going to come have a look in a moment. I'm going to lock this one down in the clipping group 2. And then I'm going to look for maybe some of these cracks. And I don't want them to be too big. But I can look within that texture and follow some of the forms that are there, bring them out, enhance what's there. And there's lots in here, and you don't have to go with all of it. You can even push some of this back, either by dropping the textured layers opacity, or by taking a soft eraser. So your eraser set to one of the softer options where the hardness level is less, and just like lightly fade out some of the texture if you need to. So yeah, there's a lot you can play with here, especially if you're using the brush. There we go. That's not working because I've got the wrong thing selected. There we go. So you can add in like this, and what tends to happen, if you do have these cracks, the crack goes in, and on this part, if it goes in like that, there's going to be a little plane change where it's catching a bit more light. So we can find an area here that's got a bit of light to it, and maybe add a little bit in there. Okay, this is really finer detail stuff. You're only going to do much later. There's a little bit over here. Face that sort of faces upward. Neaten that out. Maybe bring a little bit of this in here too. Okay, so photo textures are your friend. This is something that's often used. Maybe not quite so strong as I have it here. So I'll should probably push this back. Well, that was a wild change. That was not what I wanted. Made my UI a little too big. Let's drop it down. Something else that we will have in future to make using photo textures more efficient is being able to warp those textures. Okay, we don't have a perspective warp in Magma at the moment. We have our standard transform, just sort of your horizontal and vertical scaling and transform. But when we start playing with the warp tools, pushing that perspective so that it wraps around and follows the perspective of our rocks, then things get really, really neat. So if you can't go out and find your own textures for whatever reason, maybe the kind of thing you want just isn't around. So like I said, this was from the back of a bus, yeah, but it works pretty well as a cracked rock texture. Does this? But you can also go onto websites like Unsplash, Pexels, where usually it's free to use images. As much as you're doing a lot of transformation here, incorporated into your thing, yeah, you can use sort of free textures like this to bring a bit more zhuzh, a bit more jazz to your images. Bring a bit of texture in. You got to be proud of your rock. Let's go. I'm gonna have a little sip of water here. How are we doing for time? I want us to actually just now spend some time really getting stuck into a rock, trying to get it accurate. Let's have a look what's here. So we got Rydak over here, got the Magma team doing his rocks. Ooh, very nice. Nice hard edges there. Bit of photo texture. Very cool. Everest. Let's have a look what you got here. Come on, switch. Why is it not switching? Here we go. Nice combination there, going from a sketch, value study, and then into color. Very cool. Good way to practice. And very similar if you've missed some of our previous episodes, we did a timed exercise edition, which also a lot of fun. Great way to speed up the learning process when you're repeatedly doing the same subject and you start putting a time limit on it. You get to try different color combinations. You get to very quickly do your drawing, stop and assess, because otherwise you can spend 2 hours working on a thing, but you haven't really taken the time to step back and see if maybe you did something completely wrong or you really messed up your planes. So doing multiple iterations, short time limit, allows you to get more feedback from yourself more quickly. So this is very cool, doing multiple iterations here. And then Koshi, let's see what you got here. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Koshi. There we go, there's your rock. Very nice. Brought in the texture. Cool. I would see my recommendation here would be see if you can get some harder edges. And when you do something like this, when it's really soft too, that's cool. But then there's so much of an image when we're painting tends to have quite a soft edge, and we sharpen the edges where we want there to be attention. But here we can also go in with the eraser and like a hard eraser and like cut away to get like a neater edge. Instead of trying to paint it all neatly, we can also erase out to neaten up and harden the edges. Let's see. I see we've got a couple of viewers also on YouTube. If you guys want to join in, we've still got more canvas space here as well. I can always add in more. There we go. Look at that. This water tastes funny. Anyway, so now let's look at a collection of rocks here. We shifted into one that's got two. Oh, this really simple rock is bugging me with how poorly I did it. Too busy. Now, don't play with this now. Moving on to the next one, Ryan. Accept your failure. sometimes it's better to just start a new drawing. Don't go noodle too much. So again, gonna sketch, and we're gonna move on to this third one. Let's move all this out the way, actually. I really like this color scheme. I'm gonna stick with that. Let's first merge down the texture, and then merge this. Now going back now. Let's get it, put it out of the way. Okay, so new layer, call that one sketch, just so I know if I accidentally found myself in the wrong layer. Normal round brush, kind of small, and let's zoom in here. Let's hide that panel. So we've got quite a bit going on here. Lots of different angles. Obviously lots of different rocks. It's a little tricky to see a whole, like a big range of values here. So we might find ourselves starting off with really just two. Let's sketch it out first. I'm going to start with the one in front. Again, one can start by, why is this menu here? By drawing out, you should draw hands. Ooh, that's gonna put me on the spot for sure. Hands on it, something I've drawn for a long time. So one could start off figuring out the entire silhouette, getting all those shapes together, or you can start getting each rock down at a time. So I'm going to go with getting the first one in so that I have some information, and then I will scale out branch out into the others when I have one form already that I can relate the placement of everything else to. One doesn't have to work like that, that just tends to be my particular way. So I'm going to try to check these angles. Just trying to get the basic shape. Don't have to be perfect here. Sort of diamondish. Pretty loose and sketchy. That does a little something like that. This comes down a bit more. There's a very little tiny bit of that face. The way this is facing, you can hardly get much information there, but it is there. It's a bit squarish over here, so I'm going to keep that. Grabs in, comes up, comes out across here. That'll do. Okay, so we've got one bit of rock down. Let's start shifting to the others. So we've got one next to it over here. Quite a simple shape. Something kind of like this. And I'll carve back into it. It's just to get fit things in a box. Get your box down first, placement, and then start fitting the rest of the shape in. That could have actually come out quite a bit more. This one's kind of interesting. Some very unusual changes of plane here. Not unusual, quite normal by rock standards. Just to read it, so it comes out of here, but it bumps out over there, bumps out, and it comes down. What about this? So now I'm kind of drawing imaginary lines when it comes to getting the perspective right. It has this almost triangle shape before it shoots down like that. Over there, there's a plane change over here. We've also got this in here, so I'm going to simplify that to be pretty much like that. Now this is way too high for what's going on here. That's more or less right. But this should come down a bit more. Now I'm trying to be a tad more accurate. But that line is way too high. So if I compare with what's there, I'll probably bump up a bit. So let's try that again. Angle down a little harder. It is slight. There we go. That'll do. Oh yeah, and there was this change over here. Fixing up that shape. And let's see, this is sort of over here. So as much as you have this hard line that comes down over here, it seems to sort of spread out. It doesn't have this hard turn in form over there. So something to keep in mind. It's a bit flat. This is kind of in line roughly here. Yeah. And then it sort of angles around and over. We've got this interesting plane change here. And then we have this, where this sits just past here. This was kind of a blocky front. Tapering away into the distance. This is also good if you can play around with quite a bit with perspective here, which I very briefly covered in in our previous thing. Let's do this. Okay. Don't need to be much more accurate than that for this phase. Same thing. Going with the lasso fill. I'm going to stick with this color scheme because I like it. Lasso. Out of the way. And I'm going to just follow the outline of the sketch layer. Doesn't matter if it's not perfect, I can add to it momentarily. But this is just quicker than filling it in with a brush. Yeah, I missed a gap there. Yeah, there. And I do want to have the silhouette fixed up before I move on to the next layer, so that when I'm clipping down, it's the form that I want. That will do. I'm going to keep my sketch layer there so I can still see the next set of planes, but I'm going to create a new layer now, clip it down so it's bound to my base layer, my silhouette layer. You know, I need to fix that bit there. Actually, that was wrong. Let's grab that eraser. It turns in. There we go. Okay. I really need to set a lasso full hotkey. Let's do that. Now we're going to get our shadow layers. Now, again, we don't have a really hard light hitting particular planes here. It's quite diffused. So we do have kind of two shadow values here. One that's really dark, one that's a little less so. But I'm going to group things first. Group everything under like one shadow value, and then we'll add the darker one afterwards. So this one, if I squint my eyes, it's this one slightly darker here. It is, of course, darker underneath this. I want that sketch layer to be set to multiply, so it's easier to just see. There we go. And true to form, I have done the thing on the wrong layer. Normal digital art problems, drawing on the wrong layer. Okay. Now I'm on the right one. Cool. Back to it. This honestly comes in there. This side as well, very much shadow. This one's tricky. There is a bit of light that comes out. Looking at those little bits. Overall, I would group that in the shadow. This, of course, as well. This plane, definitely. Then this too. This little triangle shape. This plane change over here. And then this whole face. I'm even going to group this one with it. I know there's a lot of light in there. That'll be a detail that I change later. And then it's here. There we go. So let's change that. Okay. I then go one darker. Where do we have our serious darks? This definitely over here. One can, either look specifically at each plane, whether that's darker or lighter, or try and see a bit of an overall shape that shadow is making. This could even be darker. So as much as that stops there, when it comes down, it also casts a shadow in there. And it'll fade darker there. That's a detail we can add later. Under here, much darker. This plane, this section here, definitely darker. It's dark here. It's a bit of dark there. I'm going to darken this entire plane. And here it's... Well, that was a bit excessive. Something that will fade out. Keep like this for now. Squinting my eyes. Yeah, that'll be fine. Let's start with one rock, work our way through. I'm going to get rid of my sketch layer now. That looks like a bundle of rocks, I would say. Not the tidiest, but a bundle. Have a sip of strange tasting water. Check the thumbnails. Oh, 10 past 8. Okay, let's move a little quicker. Got a little bit more I still want to cover before we spend about, let's say, maybe half an hour. Okay, so these were the big shapes. And as I said, everything, big shapes down to the smaller ones. We could have overall shape was, of course, the silhouette. We went smaller by doing our different planes, our shadow planes. Could do light as well, which we will get to, and find something in between these two values, perhaps in colors. Let's do this. Up, 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 up. And now we'll shift into smaller things, smaller layers. Blend these two. Where's that? That's sort of in between them. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work. This is where I'll use a little bit for the tops here. Where to start? Okay. There's a lot of texture on this rock. We can bring that in with a rock texture later. At the moment, I just want to find some of those light areas. Let's go. Let's keep this a bit harder. Here, it's facing upward. There's a bit of light is definitely coming from the top. So some of these edges have a bit more light going on them. Here as well, this one will fade up though. Just lighten this. And again, you want to keep your edges hard. Then you want to go in with your lasso selection. That was perfect selection. There we go. Now you could play around with some other settings here to, no, it wouldn't quite get too much texture, but add a little something by adding a bit of jitter to your settings. So maybe a little bit of hue jitter, maybe a little brightness jitter. So what does this do exactly? If I'm using a hard brush here, let me zoom in a bit. You can see that each stamp of the brush has some slightly different color characteristics to it. Okay, it's because of the jitter that's there. It creates a little variation with each stamp of the brush. I don't quite like that. That's not really what I want. I want it to be a bit lighter. There we go. Set the pressure like that. Okay. And then can drop that down a little bit. It's not so intense. You can also add a bit of spread to things. If you want a really fine, a fine sort of spray, then we can add a decent amount of spread, make the brush quite small, put some spacing in here. I'll just show an example with something quite dark. But now it starts to like spread out. Okay, these could be even smaller. That's add in stuff like this. Let's make it even bigger. Spreads out a bit further. So it adds a little bit of texture there. Now that's a bit intense. So let's change our brush back to normal just by tapping the brush. Give me a bit of a lighter value here, make my brush bigger. Strong. Push it back a little bit. So you can have that texture still slightly showing through. Way more subtle now. Let's sharpen that bit up there. Time for a little change in music, I think. Yeah, so that's not quite working, that texture there, but just an example of a way that you can start to add in a little bit, especially if you do it on a separate layer. drop that opacity down, where it's a very light change. So I'll probably push this all back quite a bit more. Oh, yeah, I was changing music, wasn't I? So I'm going to come back to this. I quite enjoy these rocks. There's a lot of different plane changes, a lot of different value changes. So I'm going to come back to it. Let's change the music. There we go. Now I mentioned that I have a bit of an exercise that I like to do for warming up. Okay, and it's a build on this. We're also coming up with different rock shapes, but instead of doing studies, I'm more just playing around with shapes in my head and trying out different things. I'm going to make a new layer here to the top. And the main tool for this is the lasso fall. But what I like to do here is have my different values. Okay, so we have our presets here under the color wheel, right? This is going to be one of our key tools for this particular exercise. If you don't know what to draw, you wake up in the morning, you just want to get started, warm up, or whatever. It's a fun thing to do, and you can do it with rocks, with daggers, potion bottles, whatever. Same kind of approach. So I'm going to select one of my presets. I'm just going to take 4, 5, and 6 for this because I've been using the others. Now this will save your tool information when you're adjusting settings and stuff. So now what happens is that if I want to go back to my particular brush that I was using before, I switch to 1, and now it's kept my tool, which I didn't want it to do. So if that happens, we have some settings. Application settings. Keep current tool when switching tool presets. No. I want to have this setting active, use a separate color for each tool preset, because I'm going to set 3 of those presets, all going to be lasso full, each one a different value. Just 3 values. A sort of local value, a mid value, a shadow value, and a lighter value. So we'll use our first one as the base value, and I'm just going to select this here. I'm going to switch to 5. Again, just set it to my lasso. Wait, let's do this the other way. We're going to work our way from shadow upward. Whatever. Let's color pick this. So 4 is going to be my shadow. That was the wrong shadow. This shadow. 5 will be my base, my local, and then let's make it more extreme than that. 6 will be the light value. So now I've got my hands sitting over 4, 5, and 6 on my keypad. As I switch between them, that needs to be the lasso. There we go. I switch to the different color and values, right? Quick and easy change. 5 here, and then I'll just sort of play around with drawing a shape. It's quite a tall kind of rock here, weird underhang. I haven't thought this out. I'm just seeing what happens. Okay, let's say our light is coming from the top right. Okay, so there's probably going to be a bit of a shadow plane here, probably cast down like this. Let's say there's a bit of shadow under here. Maybe this plane as well, if the light's coming from above. Okay, well, what's happening with that light above? Okay, you can do here, put some light there. Maybe there's a little shelf here. It's also catching some of the light. Maybe that can be bigger. Maybe there's a little step even on this little plane, just a little one. Maybe there's a crack. I'll switch back to my shadow. Just add a little crack in there. Let's see, 5. Let's have this round share. This part's also going to be facing upward. Oh, that didn't quite work. So we have a bit of light there. Let's change it. So just playing like this, trying to find a form. Maybe I even want to erase a bit of it. I'm going to push and hold E, which turns my lasso fill into a sort of lasso eraser. So I can just carve out like that. Cool. Down a bit more. There we go. And then just on to the next one. Let's see, let's maybe play with something that's a bit half moonish. So I can draw my half moon, but then it's sitting on a base here. Somehow resting, I don't know, then what's this, like a banana, the banana tree shrine. Or it's got some sharp bits on it, maybe. Maybe it's the sculpture of some sort of weird fish. Fish? Well, then it's got to have a tail now, doesn't it? So this is like a fun exercise if you're just struggling to come up with stuff. This can be a lot of fun. Oh, now things get tricky because I've made these weird shapes there. Oh, I went a bit far. Some other weird carvings that go into it. I don't know, maybe a weird shelf there. Yeah, that looks, I don't know what's going on here. But it's just a way to play, right? To try and play with different shapes. Let's try another one. Maybe something a bit more upside down triangle of sorts. Also on this upside down pyramid. Okay, then a shadow, keeping with that same direction, something like that. Maybe some little steps in it somehow. Got of our light coming from the. Whoops, that's the wrong one. 6. Why has 6 changed? 1, 2. Click. And maybe there's another square on top of it. I don't know. It's plain shadow. We're going to be casting a shadow too. All right, so who knows what you can come up with? You just start playing with this. It's just it's a good exercise. A lot of things won't work, but you're like, oh wow, that could be kind of fun. Or next thing it turns into a bit of a portal, or I don't know, maybe you decide, oh, this is a cool spot for like a little house or a temple, or I don't know, a shrine of sorts with stairs that run around the whole thing. It's a way to just start to get ideas coming through, because as you start making shapes, it's like reading clouds. You start to like just see random things. You can obviously go about it with just a brush as well and just make a whole lot of marks, see what happens, and find shapes within that. But you can also do it with the lasso fold. So yeah, that's enough what I'll say about that. But just to make it like a quick and fun process is just setting things up beforehand, where you have those 3 presets set to your different values. Now, I want to spend more time on these rocks. Maybe I'll drop in another texture here, see what happens. So I have taken a few photos, but I also grabbed one off of pexels.com. I'm going to drop that one in. And sort of like free to use stuff. Nice sort of cracked tarmac kind of texture. Really dark though, really dark. So I want to change that. And it's got a bit of a dark purplish blue to it. I want to get that out. Let's drop the hue saturation. Let's play with the brightness and contrast here. Let's reduce. Needs to be lighter. Radix stealing the, the texture there. Yeah. So yeah, you can just do a selection and copy and paste if you want to get the same texture. Otherwise, you go to pexels.com. There's a textures tab. You just type in rock texture. You'll find a thing there. So I'm going to bring this down to here, I believe. Make a clipping group. So now it's set to the whole silhouette there. And I'll change the layer mode. You can play with different layer modes, see what happens. If there are color characteristics to the image with the texture, that'll cause other things to happen. But normally multiply, add a low opacity or overlay as well. This tends to get, this is a very nice texture. That seems to get the best effect. I'm going to drop the opacity because I don't need it to be so strong. I just want it to be a subtle thing. And maybe I'll spot, yeah, you can still see there's some cracks in here, something that we can play with and veer off from the original reference material. But I do still kind of want to stick to a bit of that. It just adds a bit of grit. What's obviously going to happen though is if I paint over that, I'm going to lose some of that quality. So I'm going to shift this underneath. There we go. And now we can go a little deeper with some shadows and find these more subtle details. But now it's got a little texture. I don't feel as bad about it. Let's darken some stuff here. How's everybody doing? You got any questions so far about what I've covered? Feel free to ask. Perhaps next time we'll play around a little bit more with texture, but like stuff growing on rocks, finding some interesting patterns. I think that could be cool. But really, this is something you can lose yourself in. All these little details, finding these subtle plane changes. Like, yeah, there's some nice grooves. Let's get into that. Let's get into that. And why not even use this as a starting point to actually learn about some different rock formations while you're at it? So a lot of these different patterns, different type of textures, different reflectivity, which is also something you want to consider when it comes to textures. So that's the same as that there. And if you're getting into concept art for video games, or yeah, most likely for video games, I think rocks and other sort of destructible things, like weapons crates or other sort of environmental things. Let's change that a little bit bigger. You're going to be doing a lot of these these kinds of things. But like I say, with rocks, you start off with a rock, a simple, small object. Rocks can obviously be a whole lot bigger. So once you have some really funky shapes, like in that little exercise I showed you now, you can start to build entire environments around that. Once you start adding other elements that suggest the scale that that rock exists in, suddenly it becomes a mountain. So yeah, this is, I love it. I love painting these rocks. Let's get this a bit darker here. Now I've kept that texture layer on top, and I'm drawing underneath it, just so I can still keep that textural quality as I go. That can impact a little bit when you're color picking, so just be mindful of it if it does affect too much. Whoops, that's too dark. There's another little triangle there. Actually really like, so with rocks as well, unless you are trying to keep things very specific to a particular kind of rock, Control Alt to color pick from your layer. Thanks, Radek. Yes, that is a good thing to note. It should actually, yeah. So you'll notice even when you go to your color picker, you can pick from the overall drawing or from the layer. So as Radek pointed out, that shortcut, Control and Alt, will select only from the layer. But by default, you're picking from the entire drawing. What have we got here? We've got this. I'm gonna bring in some of these other cracks that exist in the texture photo. If I'm making that a crack, it's going to be some light as well. It's going to be a bit of light. I can see some over here. There's a bit of like a triangular plane change. Let's see, Control Alt. Although I have not put because I'm working on a new layer, I've gone and tricked myself. Let's merge that down there too. Now I can pick correctly, because otherwise I'm color picking from empty areas. So zoomed in, do I? No, I don't. No, I don't. It's got a nice triangular form in here. So it comes down like so. And here we've got a little bit as well. Might be too. Oops, that's. Maybe even lighten that section up. Up and over. It's a little darker in here. Maybe not so dark. Let's shift that. We've got some dark over here. Nice. Again, another sort of triangular shape. Yeah, I tried to do a triangle and I did something totally different. Let's pick this layer. I want to adjust my silhouette slightly where it's in here. Makes things a little more interesting. And also the angle changes a bit up top here. And then should actually bump out a little bit further. So along the way, you know, you are going to find things that that maybe you're not happy with, you could have done a little better, or you're not happy with that silhouette, you just make changes as you go. That's just how the painting process goes. Just back and forth, back and forth. Let's come back up here. Again, we've got some interesting stuff going on over here. This sort of fades out, so lesser. Keep that sharp edge. That wasn't the best selection. I'll be careful. A little bigger. Opacity, let's make that even softer brush. Just dabbing to slightly gradate towards this plane change, where it gets a little bit of shadow. Let's make this a bit smaller, just a bit smaller. That's a bit over there. So now you might find yourself starting to soften a bit of edges instead of keeping them all super hard, and start to change your values, breaking away from the standard value structure that you've got, that basic value structure rather. Let's bump up the hardness again. So here I want to be darker, but I don't want to go too dark. It's subtle change. Okay, that was way too subtle. Okay, so subtle even I didn't see it. A bit more. And there's a little bit over here too. How are we doing for time? Cool, still plenty. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Added him. Plane change here. It's a little bit of light over there. A little bit of light in there. Here, how does this edge work? It sort of has a little thing over there. And then here changes too. Now I need to address this. Let's find something sort of in the middle. It's bigger. There we go. Okay, there are more plane changes here going on. Let's see. So like that, there. It's a bit of a lighter thing going on over here. Oh, and then there's lots of stuff going on in the shadows here. This bumps up a bit. It's not such a smooth, hard plane change like I had it there. Break away from that basic shape. Here, this can also fade out a bit. Let's see, it's a bit of shadow here. It's kind of dark up here. That could be a lower opacity to find a value in between. Like that. There we go. You can accentuate those edges by increasing the contrast. So like here, for example, it's starting to light up along this edge, but if I want to bring a bit more attention there, I can come in with a darker value just to pull the eye. Strong contrast is going to draw the eye in to that area. Zooming out. Looking like something. Looking like something. Okay, yeah, that edge looks pretty crisp there. A bit of shadow in there. Something going up there. This is maybe a little too much. Let's dial this back. Dial this back. Just want it to be a little bit light. A little bit light. There we go. And this can fade in. A bit in there too. So dabbing and spreading. Of course, one can exaggerate these subtle planes much more if you want to. These subtle plane changes, I mean. Especially when you want to go for a more graphic look, harder edges, more stylized. I want to bring this up quite a bit more, actually. This edge. Okay. See if this texture gives me something else to work with. Let's neaten that up first. It's an interesting little crack in here. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Now I want to follow a bit of the plane change. This is where you start coming up with your own ideas for it. It's going to come up like that. Maybe push back. Let's lighten the lip of it here. There we go. This is kind of dark already. Got a bit more shadow in here. What's good? More shadow in here. There's a bit of dark in there. This also needs some texture here. I've got a bit of light landing on the top here, which is now not showing up. There we go. Like that. Like that. And typically I'll just start to, if I see like there is a bit of a change, like this almost looks like it goes all the way across, but that's definitely a bit excessive the way I've done it. But I'll adjust afterwards. It's just about getting things down. Now I can soften. Depth opacity. Push it back, make it a bit more subtle. But I feel like I'm kind of overworking it now because this section here was looking kind of nice. And then trying to go too realistic, try to add in too much of your own sort of texture, you can start to mess with it a bit. And that is often one of the most challenging things, knowing when to just stop. It depends on what you're going for, right? If you want hyper realistic, you're going to spend a lot of time getting into all this tiny little textures, tiny little plane changes. A little bit of shadow in here. Section. There's a little bit of a dark piece that comes in. Let's make this harder. It's a sharp little detail. Here we go. Bit of a bend that goes in there. Nice. And a bit of shadow in here. Oh, that's too strong. No, that's too much. Too much, I say, too much. And it's easy with a subject like this to also to stop looking at your reference and just go back and forth and stop paying attention. It takes practice to just not do that. You want to keep looking. Dark here. Let's round that edge off a bit. There's a bit of shadow in there. Interesting shaping of light here. So we're going to darken off the inside rather. Let this be the light. That stand out a little bit more. I'm going to add a bit of a lighter value behind it on that rock, which it needs anyway, but it also just brings forward that element. Yeah, looking like something. looking like something. This edge is actually quite difficult to see, and the reference sort of blends in because the values are very close together. So I could probably darken this up a bit more. Don't have to have as crisp of an edge. And if you want to check values, yeah, it could certainly be lighter in some parts. Exaggerate some small areas of light. Let's do it. Let's do it. Little bits on top here. I don't know if this will work or not. We'll see. Just tiny bits, just tiny bits. It definitely sounds like the music is on a slow, you know, like old cassette tapes when they started stretching out. Yeah, that's the sort of vibe I'm getting from this music. Let's have a look here. Awesome work. Good, yeah. Nice stuff. It's a bit of a lighter thing going on here. So yeah, a lot of back and forth if you want to get things realistic. Not my strong suit. Can lighten this one up ever so slightly. Lighten up that. There's a slight, tiny little sharp piece turn thing over there. Looking for all that stuff. All that stuff. I want to go lighter. What sort of shape have we got here? It's difficult to see. Just low opacity. Could even have gone lighter there. This can be a bit darker. Put a little bump in there. Coolios. What's our time? 8:54. I think we should probably call it there. This has been fun for me anyway. What do you guys think? Was this a sort of interesting exercise to do? Is this something you want to do more of? I definitely want to spend more time on a few. We'll branch off into some others. I got a lot of reference on my PRF board here of just different rocks. But maybe we'll be able to do this again with some texture brushes sometime. But just to quickly recap, weird fish thing. Like we did landscapes, rocks, as much as they can have all these crazy forms, start by simplifying things for yourself into either a broader simpler shape that the rock will fit into. So like a little box. If I were to draw in here, switch to my brush. Nope. Hey, come on now, let's do it on a new layer now, don't I? This over. Okay, well, we can say with this, for example, this just fits within a simple box shape. And then you can kind of fit things around in there, carve away, or just look at the overall silhouette. Go with, you don't worry too much about curves. Try and just get the hard lines and directions of the lines. Get that right, and then you can start fitting all the rest in. Big, simple shapes, carve out what you need to, add what you need to, and then work down into smaller details. Got to think about light. Always know, no matter what you're drawing, you got to know where your light source is coming from. Think about plane changes. Think about how that light's landing on a surface. Reflectivity is also something to consider with these rocks, not so much because they're kind of not the most reflective type of rock, so light's not going to be pushed out so much. But if you start to consider an environment, maybe there's let's have a look here. Maybe the ground is there's some bounce light off the ground, which is going to get caught in the shadows. Let's make this bigger. You might notice that in here you start getting a bit of a yellow tinge with the bounce light coming in, and it softens some of the shadow areas. They're not quite so, but it depends on what you've got around in the area. If you've got all this green grass, then that's probably going to change things up. You might have a bit of green in here or a bit of blue. Lots to consider when you're doing stuff like this. But we're just doing the rocks without any sort of environmental influence. And then just work down into the finer details. If you don't have textured brushes, there are textured photos that you can bring in, play with your layer modes, and that'll add a little bit of grain, a little bit of noise, maybe some details that you can pull out and make a bit stronger. So yeah, that covers it for today's lesson. Hope you enjoyed it. We will be back next week, of course. Still haven't quite decided, but I think we're gonna keep going with a few more rocks. Maybe we'll let it be less instructional, but more of just time spent doing a nice study, getting into the nitty gritty, or fit it within a bigger landscape. Maybe I'll figure it out. Anyway, guys, thank you. I hope you have a good day or night wherever you are in the world, and feel free to continue working on this. And if you want to share your work, we've got the Magma Classroom channel on Discord. You can post your work there. It'll be awesome to see what you do and share it with others. Yeah, that's all from me. Ciao for now, guys. See you next week.